evening, everyone, and welcome to our weekly study session. My name is Michael Rapaski, and I am your host for this evening's festivities. Want to start? We're going to be probably getting out of here at about 6:40, 6:45 tonight. Sorry to clip it off a little bit early, but schedule is running tight this week. Want to open with what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks is, if while you're working through your test practice or you're studying or doing your CompuCram or exam prep, if you've highlighted any questions or have run into anything that is particularly difficult or challenging for you, I want to work through those problems in real time. If we don't have any, or if we don't have a full 40 minutes worth, we'll do some practice problems on the CompuCram for some of the bigger sections. So if we could, for starters, just anybody who wants to unmute, drop something in the chat, whatever you got. Let's see what it looks like for what's giving you grief here in your test prep. I will remind you all, I've already passed the exam, so I'm here for you. What help do you need? And if we just want to get right into practice problems, we can do that. But I want everybody to be dialed in and know what they know and know what they don't. And let's focus on the latter. So who's got something, who needs something? All right. Well, with that, we will just dive into practice problems. I am going to remind everybody that if the only way you were preparing for the exam is with the CompuCram or with a single test software, you are at risk of not being well prepared enough. If you're just running the CompuCram, once a day or a couple times a day in the sections that you're underperforming in, I promise you that your brain will figure out what questions exist and what the right answer is, and you will not be forced to think critically. So please, if you're using CompuCram, grab an opportunity with the CE Shop, Prep Agent, Real Estate Tutor, whatever it is, that's something else. Hit the books, review your notes, find other practice problems online, and work through those. But the idea that you're going to grab one piece of test software and it's going to be everything you need will by and large lead to people not performing to a passing grade. All right, so practice problems. What sections are you guys most interested? What sections are we most interested in this evening? To hit some practice problems.
What about contracts?
All right. What about contracts? We will hit contracts. It's one of the largest that are going to be on your exam, largest sections that are on your exam. Rel, I don't know who Rel 74 is, but just to be clear, different things are going to be challenging to different people. And so identify the ones that are most difficult for you, and we can help you with that here. All right. Let's start with contracts. There are a few big sections on the exam. General principles of agency, practice of real estate and contracts are the three largest. So if you can get good at anything specifically, or make sure that you are above average for anything specifically, it's going to be those three sections. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now I'm going to read the question to everybody. I'm going to need everyone to then put an A, B, C, or D in the chat corresponding to the multiple choice answer. We'll see how the group answers. We'll carry on from there. If it's something we need to break down, great. If everybody gets it right, great. But please, if you're in a position, have your keyboard handy, have your phone flipped over to typing or into the chat box so that you can participate. Question number one, a meeting of the minds refers to A, offer and acceptance, B, consideration, C, consummation of a contract, or D, closing a contract. A, B, C, or D. All right, looks like we are majority A in the chat, and that is going to be correct. One party makes an offer, another one accepts. That mutual assent or agreement is called the meeting of the minds. Consummation of a contract doesn't take place until closing, when the deed transfers and the cash is exchanged, right? So just tips like consummation and closing of a contract are generally going to be assumed to be similar. Consideration is what is offered. It needs to be valuable consideration, not just good consideration. And then, offer and acceptance is the meeting of the minds, because historically, this is an easy way to remember it. Historically, and just up till like maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe, you presented offers to the sellers. Like a buyer would present an offer to a seller in person, right? So there would be negotiation live. And so that would be the meeting of the minds. Question number two, contract law requires which amount of earnest money to be submitted with sales? Is it A, 10% of the asking price, B, no earnest money requirements, C, 6% of the offer, or D, at least $1,000? All right, the B's in the chat. That is correct. No earnest money is required. Now, without it, you will weaken your offer. And on a standard amount of earnest money, 1% to 2%, right? And you don't see that get too crazy in too many markets, although sometimes you can strengthen your offer by saying, hey, look, my people will put up $10,000 of earnest money. But most of the time, 1% good faith money deposited immediately. Question number three, if Ed purchases a property from Susan by installment land contract, when will title pass to Ed? A, when the contract has been signed by all parties, B, when the deed is placed in escrow, C, when the deed is delivered to the buyer, or D, when the seller exercises the liquidated damages clause. Yeah, the answer is going to be C, when the deed passes to the buyer. Ed doesn't come into the title until he comes into the deed, which occurs at the end of the contract, right? So when you use a purchase money mortgage, everything happens when you execute the contract and it's consummated. Land installment contract is where the seller effectively plays the bank. And that seller is not going to transfer title until the end of the contract when the deed passes. Question number four, Buddy wanted to offer to purchase the Walker's home. He engaged Joan to be his agent. When the offer was delivered to Mr. Walker, it contained a provision limiting the time of acceptance to 48 hours. Mr. Walker rejected the offer out of hand as inadequate. After thinking about it for 24 hours, Mr. Walker called Agent Jones and said, "I've changed my mind. I'd like Buddy's offer." What is the status of Buddy's offer? Is it A, it is now a binding contract that Mr. Walker has accepted? B, it was terminated when Mr. Walker first rejected it? C, it is still open. It had 48 hours to run. Or D, it is still open. Buddy has not formally withdrawn it. All right, looks like the B's have it, and that is correct. When you reject an offer, when a seller rejects an offer, no, I don't like that offer, I don't want it, it's a dead deal. Game over, right? And now the contract can be drawn back up and you can go through the whole rigmarole again, but when it is rejected, it terminates the opportunity for that to be a deal. Question number 5. A subdivision developer employs Agent Sue to sell lots. John, a licensed agent, offers to buy lot B3 for $20,000. A sales contract is executed. However, through a typographical error that no one noticed, the contract identified the lot as D3, which was listed at $25,000. What is the status of the contract? Is it A, void, B, invalid, C, enforceable, or D, voidable? All right, we got questions a little bit, or excuse me, answers a little bit all over the board here. We got A's, B's, D's, maybe a C mixed in there. And if you have no idea what the answer is, put a question mark. Drop a question mark in the chat so we know who's really struggling here. All right, I think we got as many D's as anything else, so let's go with that. It also helps that it's correct. All right, so here's the deal. Unless the question tells you that a contract has been voided, it would not have a void status, right? So when you see questions like this, there's a good chance that the answer is going to be voidable. And that is when a mistake is material, mutual, unintentional, and free of negligence. It means that the contract can be canceled by what would consider to be the injured party, but they could still go through with it, right? So this contract is voidable by the developer. No one was, it was a mutual, material, unintentional, and free of negligence. Now, the developer might say, "Hey, listen, we'll honor that contract if you want us to," but the buyer intended to buy lot B3. They got lot D3. They might say, "Yeah, void it. Let's do it over." Right? Cool. Or they might say, "Hey, I got a $25,000 lot for 20 grand. I want to keep the contract." And the seller would say, "No, that's not an option. We being the injured party choose to void the contract." Right? Now they might honor it because that would be better, might be better for business. The question you'll typically see this then is like, hey, if somebody enters into a contract with a minor or with fraudulent terms, is the contract invalid, void, voidable, or enforceable? And the answer is that it's voidable, but it is not automatically void. If there are fraudulent terms in a contract, it doesn't automatically nullify the contract. The person who was being frauded would say, yeah, even though the numbers weren't right, we were given fraudulent profit and loss statements on this building, we still want to buy it. And so they can go through with the contract and continue with the sale of said contract. So when you see this, the answer is typically going to be voidable. Question number 6, a legal remedy that would compel a vendor to execute a deed pursuant to a valid land installment contract is known as A, writ of execution, B, specific performance, C, equity of redemption, or D, the execution of sales. Remember, put a question mark if you don't know. That way we know who's thinking and who's needs more intel. All right, so looks like majority A's here. And it's going to be B, specific performance, right? And just think, that's going to be a requirement to perform specifically. And that's, a remedy available to the buyer that forces them to execute. Hey, the contract's been completed and there's an opportunity to, and the seller tries to back out, the buyer can sue for specific performance. Question number 7, broker Alice conveys an offer from her client to broker Betty, wherein Alice's client wishes to purchase a 300-acre farm by giving broker Betty's client $100,000, 2 one-year-old tractors, and 50 head of Black Angus cattle. What would the consideration offered by broker Alice's client be? Would it be A, valuable, B, inadequate, C, good, or D, good and valuable? All right, looks like we have a lot of D's in there, and the answer is A. Good consideration is not a factor. Good consideration is things like love and kindness and caring and endearment, right? They are not sufficient considerations to form contracts. Valuable consideration is the only thing that matters. Is it an item of value? As much as we might want our spouses and colleagues to think that our kindness or love are items of value, they are actually just things that are good. And value is the only thing that matters here. Considerations shouldn't be good or valuable. They can't be, them being good enough isn't good enough. And the adequacy of the consideration is not of merit, right? That's, you can see things transferred for, your value of 50 head of Black Angus cattle might be very different, or you might view the adequacy of that as insufficient. But if both parties agree to it, that's all that matters, and is that it is an item of value. Question number 8, Lauren receives an offer on her property and makes a counteroffer. Meanwhile, another offer comes in from another broker. The listing at this time is considered to be A, contingent, B, active, C, withdrawn, or D, pending. So it seems that the group either thinks it's active or pending. So we don't think it's contingent or withdrawn. Okay. So I make an offer to buy Jessica's home. And she said for $100,000. And she says, no, I want $500,000. That's a counter offer, right? So terminated the original offer and put forth a new offer. We are not under contract. We have not agreed to anything. She has simply said that my offer wasn't good enough and she has put forth a different one. It's no different than if I would have offered her $100,000 and she was just thinking about it. The property remains active. A contract has not been formed. It is not pending or contingent at this time. So it is still active and offers can come in from other brokers with no problem at all. Question number 9, what is true of a voidable contract? A, voidable contract may be enforceable at the option of the innocent party. B, a signed real estate contract cannot be voided. C, all parties to the contract must have reached 16 years of age, or it can be voided. Or D, a forged contract is voidable. This should be an easy one. I explained this one thoroughly the last time voidability came up. For those of you who heard me say that contracts made under fraudulent terms would be voidable, do not mistake fraudulent for forgery. That is, anyone who answered D, reconsider your answer. So we have a lot of them, but the answer is A, injured parties can choose to void a contract. All parties in the contract must have reached 18 years of age, not 16 years of age. Otherwise, they're considered a minor, and therefore the contract can be voided. Signed real estate contracts can be voided. Forged contracts are not contracts. So in this situation, you could know contracts are always enforceable. Voidable contracts are always enforceable by the innocent party. Or you could do deductive reasoning on the other ones. Question number 10. A buyer and seller have agreed to all terms of a contract. Both have signed the document. One party would now like to make a change. How can this legally be done? A, it can be done by mutual agreement in writing by both parties. B, it cannot be changed in any way. C, it cannot be changed, or excuse me, it can be changed by a unilateral codicil from either party. Or D, it can be changed by the written agreement of the buyer and the buyer's attorney. A is the correct answer. These things happen all the time. We write up an addendum. Both parties review it and sign it and agree to it, and it augments the contract. Question number 11, the first instrument a buyer usually signs in a real estate transaction is A, the deed, B, the mortgage, C, the listing agreement, or D, an offer to purchase. D is correct, the offer to purchase. A buyer doesn't sign a listing agreement, a seller does. And the buyer would sign a mortgage after at the end of a contract, once they're closing on a property, and the deed comes along with that. It's also important to remember that it is which one are they most likely to sign first of the options presented, because they will likely sign a consumer guide to agency, and a buyer broker agreement ahead of signing an offer to purchase. Question number 12. In order to have a valid contract, the good faith deposit must be paid in the form of A, a personal check drawn from the seller's bank, B, anything the parties agree on, C, cash money in small bills, or D, a cashier's check drawn from the buyer's bank. Somebody who chose D, why do you think it's D? Type it in the chat or unmute. Come on, let's defend our answers here. I didn't say you were wrong. It comes from the bank and is legitimate. Right. Cash is pretty legit too. So somebody who chose B, why do you think it's B? We're mostly B or D, so let's hear this out. Why do you think it's B?
Because it's basically whatever the two parties agree on, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, why is that? Why is that the case?
You can trace the check.
Because it's whatever you decide on this that can be termed valuable.
That's right. In effect, that is the angle. Earnest money. How's this? There are rules and regulations that stipulate what happens to earnest money when deals go wrong. But there is not a there's nothing in the Ohio revised code about the amount of earnest money that's required, how it's required to be received and recorded, and all those other things. It's all defined inside of the contract, right? And so whatever the buyer and seller agree upon, that's how earnest money works for that deal. Some will want it held at a title company. Some will want it held by a third party. Some will want it held by a brokerage. The only person that can't hold earnest money in a transaction is you as the real estate agent. It can come from any bank in the world. It can go to any title company in the world. There's a million different ways to do it. As long as it is consistent with what is defined in the contract, that is how it should be followed. You can say, hey, I mean, I've done commercial deals with hundreds of thousands of dollars of earnest money, right? $250,000 earnest money for a deal that's going to take 18 months to close. Cool. They want it held in an interest-bearing account and they want to draw the interest on it. Write it in the contract. That's perfectly fine, right? On a normal transaction, $1,500, check dropped off to the title company is sufficient, right? As long as both parties agree to it, and they agree to it in the contract. And then we all have to do what the contract says. So make sure, this is a sneak peek as to what your future looks like as a realtor. Make sure your clients have read and understand the contract and understand what they need to do. As soon as it's accepted, is get that money transferred to the title company or to whatever party is meant to receive those and escrow those funds. Question number 13. Colin makes an offer to buy a seller's property and gives the seller $2,000 as earnest money. Before the seller decides to accept the offer, Colin calls the seller and announces that he is withdrawing the offer and asks the seller to return the earnest money. Which statement is true? Is it A, the buyer is entitled to get the earnest money back? B, the buyer is in breach of the contract? C, the broker gets to keep the earnest money? Or D, the seller gets to keep the earnest money? Yeah, A is correct. The buyer gets the earnest money back. There was never a contract. It was never the seller's money. Here's an important thing to remember. Before the contract is accepted, the earnest money is the buyer's earnest money. After the deal closes, those funds are dispersed to the appropriate parties, and typically the seller is getting a portion of the total dollars, right? And so it's the seller's money. While the deal's under contract, it's nobody's money. It's not the buyer's money. You cannot tell them that they're guaranteed to get it back. Most of the time they do, but not always, depending on why the deal falls apart, when it falls apart, and who's driving the falling apart of the deal. That's going to determine what happens with that money. Question number 14, the basic requirements for an offer include A, subjective intent to contract, B, objective intent, C, neither objective nor subjective intent to contract, or D, both objective and subjective intent to contract. What is required for an offer? So subjective means like subject to somebody's opinion, or under the assumption of, the intent, right? It is not expressed intent. Objective means that anybody looking at it's going to say they intended to be in contract. Which one do you think is more likely to be required? Somebody's opinion or something closer to fact? Yeah. Objective intent. People's opinions don't matter when it comes to contracts. What the contract says is what matters. And so whether you subjectively think somebody's going to write an offer, they haven't written an offer, right? You need objective intent that, yes, I'm going to buy this house for this amount of money. That's what an offer and a contract does. Not, yeah, we're thinking the guy down the street's going to buy it. Question number 15. Listing agent Jill notifies a client that she is bringing an offer for her to consider from an MLS agent. On the way to the client's house, Jill receives the call from a buyer whom she has an agency relationship. The buyer wants to see the listing and she agrees to meet him at the house. The potential buyer wants to make an offer and asks Jill to suggest a price that would be good for her. Jill looks at the offer sent by the other agent, suggests the buyer offer $500 more. What statement is true here? A, the listing agent did exactly the right thing. B, the broker should be proud of this listing agent. C, when acting as a dual agent, the salesperson cannot suggest or recommend specific terms. Or D, the listing agent has nothing to worry about. Yeah. Guys, by and large, common sense, or like the do right rule is going to bail you out a lot of things. Like, does that seem shady? Yes, of course. Is it wrong? Yes. No broker is going to be proud of somebody who grifts an extra $500 by sacrificing their ethics, right? Dual agency is very difficult because of that. Like, you're going to have more information and it becomes difficult to not share with all the parties. That's why I discourage dual agency. It's hard to act in the best interest of both parties at the same time. Now, you can represent one party and have the other group unrepresented and work in the best interest of your client, while the other person works and negotiates in the best interest of themselves. Or what I like to do is refer that deal out to somebody else, get an agent on the other side. It makes things smoother. It makes communication better. and I capture a referral fee for referring one side of the deal. All right, we got about 5 minutes before I'm going to have to get my stiletto out the door here. We can, if anyone is joined that has specific questions or issues that they're running into or example problems that they can't quite get right, throw those in the chat or unmute and let's talk about it, or we can hit a few more questions in another section, whatever you guys want to do.
Hi, what did you say were major parts on the test? What you said, the contract and what else? On the
So
exam?
for the national exam, your three biggest sections, right, with the most questions. And let me see. I'm gonna stop my share real quick, and I'll find them, and I bet you I can find them and put them in the chat. Yeah, that way you guys can have all those. Sorry. So I'm going to put these in the chat and then I'll talk about them. So for the national exam, there are 80 questions and you need to pass, excuse me, you need, oh shoot. Yeah, let me try that again. Get that in a better order for you guys. 80 questions, you need 56 of them to pass. And then for the state, there are 40 questions that you need to get 28 of right. So let's talk national first. The biggest sections for the national exam are going to be contracts, practice of real estate, and general principles of agency, right? So think about this. You need to get 56 questions right. 35 of the 80 questions on the test, just under 50% of the questions on the exam are coming from 3 sections. So if you master leasing and property management, which only has 2 questions, and never master contracts, you're going to have a real tough time getting this done. You throw in financing, transfer a title, or financing and property ownership, and you are you're at 59 of the 80 questions, right? So 3/4 of the questions are coming from just a few sections, but the bang for your buck is in contracts, principles of agency, and practice of real estate. On the state level, you got state governance, licensing requirements, license laws and rules of the Ohio Real Estate Commission, and brokerage relationships, right? So you need to get 28 of 40 questions to get the state passed. What I'd say on the state is just study them all. Like there's, yeah, you could just study license law and brokerage relationships, but it's such a small number of questions that you're better off just knowing them all and getting state knocked out. And what I see more often than not is people pass state and fail national, right? Pass state, fail national. Very rarely do I see somebody pass national and fail state. And if I do, they get through it right on the next try, right? It is really the practice of real estate, the function of contracts, and just what it means to be a real estate agent that gets people strung up. So focus there and you'll be in a really good spot. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Good. Any other questions before we wrap for this evening? And then in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be somebody else taking over these on my behalf. Don't worry, they're going to be awesome and a really good resource for you guys. But just a heads up that my FM DJ voice is going to be no longer here on Tuesday nights. We'll still hold the session, but you'll get somebody much better than me, much more helpful than me. But what else? What else do you have? Give me one more question to get us out the door. Let's end on a high note. Anybody taking the exam anytime in the next week? Anyone get it scheduled? Well, you're all shy tonight. Y'all have your cameras off. I'll let you get to whatever you got on the horizon. We will be back here next Tuesday night. If you need anything, please let me or any other member of the team know.